Good afternoon and welcome, fellow City of New York public servants. Today is part one of building an age-inclusive New York City because the time is now. Today we learn about how the workforce and the population as a whole are aging and the need for older workers to address the labor shortage projections and the imperative to combat ageism, because ageism, racism, and sexism are all linked. And it will be up to you, DEI, APO, HR, and EEO leadership, all of us, to create a more just, inclusive, and successful New York City. Before we start, a few housekeeping items. So all attendees are muted upon entry, and so please remain muted throughout the session. Do use the chat option. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your ideas, your questions, your thoughts. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session, so please stay on. You'll get a chance to ask questions to all the experts that are here today. We are going to have some poll questions, right? We want to learn from you, so please do those surveys. The copy of these slides and additional resources will be shared with you, and do spread the word. Lots of hashtags here, right? Hashtag Age Inclusive New York City, hashtag Combat Ageism, hashtag Equity Inclusion, and also tag us at NYC Seniors, at NYC DCAS, at NYC CCHR. And be present and engage, right? We are the City of New York. So thank you once again for being here. And then today's agenda. As you see, we have several remarks from Commissioner Lorraine Cortez Vasquez, Commissioner Donna and Pinock. We have wonderful keynote remarks from Peter Caldes, and joining us also from CCHR, Deputy Commissioner Joanne Camuff Ward, and our friend at DCAS, Kadian Uttar. And I said, right, polls, so here we are, right? Survey says, first question, have you thought of age inclusion in your DEI, human resources, and EEO work? In question two, how would you rate your level of expertise with DEI? Had already polled.
So we have about 48%, 48
Nice.
individuals that have responded.
Wonderful, thank you.
You want to get a little bit more. So
thank you,
if we can
Kadian.
get that number up to maybe 65.
I love it.
The poll, so we're
awesome.
Close. So I just need 5 more people to do it, then we'll close it out. Just one more. We're
all right, one more, and then we're going to share results.
One more person to respond. There you go. Okay, awesome. Good. We got
all right.
All right, I'll go ahead and end the poll and share with it.
Oh, that's fantastic. 73% have thought of age inclusion in your work. That's great. And then in terms of how well versed, we've got 27% that well-versed, 44 somewhat. And we've got some experts here, 3%, fantastic. Thank you for participating. Your answers are really going to help us design the next event. Thank you. And now it's my honor to introduce the New York City Department for the Aging, DFTA's Commissioner Lorraine Cortez Vasquez. When I say that Commissioner Cortez Vasquez's mission is to combat ageism, I do not exaggerate. Her family moved from Puerto Rico to New York City in 1921. They were part of a large group of Puerto Ricanos who migrated after the Jones Act of 1917 extended citizenship. Seeing and experiencing firsthand the hardship of discrimination, Commissioner Cortez Vasquez, through various roles as president of Hispanic Federation, New York State Secretary of State, Executive Vice President of Multicultural Markets at AARP, she has dedicated her life to combating all discrimination, gender, race, LGBTQI, disability, ageism. And ageism being what she believes is a human rights issue that has been least addressed and in these times rather, equally as urgent, the intersectionality. But hear it from her. Welcome, Commissioner Cortez Vasquez.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for that generous introduction, Maritza. Yeah, I love to hear the story that my family's been here since 1921. And then I hate to face the reality that the discrimination they faced in 1921 existed just as strong as it did in 1921. And the saddest part of that statement is that many more of us are informed about these egregious acts, and yet they continue. So, which is why I say that our work is not done. Every new decade, every new phase, our work just gets reinforced. The importance of our work gets reinforced, which means that we have to become more knowledgeable on how to combat it. And we combat it through education. Although I have to tell you that sometimes that I tire of being a teacher. And that most importantly, we combat it with very good examples of success. And I think that's one of the ways that it resonates. But if those of you who've been keeping up with the news and looking at the Senate confirmation hearings of our soon-to-be new justice of the Supreme Court, you can see that our work still has to be done. And there's a lot that we have to do together. As Maritza said, I'm really proud. First of all, I can't thank DCAS enough, and the commission of DCAS, who's also a champion for eliminating all kinds of barriers and ensuring that we have diversity and inclusion in all arenas in the city of New York. And I'm just looking forward to all of the things that are going to be realized under her leadership. So thank you for doing this. But as Maritza had said, ageism is one of the last human rights discriminations that has barely been touched by society globally, and definitely society in the United States. And we know that by the number of age discrimination cases that are just looked at as employment issues, and they go deeper than that. Many of them are long-standing marginalization issues, as well as economic barriers to our communities. Women, particularly women, and one of the most pronounced ways that we've seen ageism is in the media. Not only in the media in terms of the way vast media corporations, women in the media are usually released much earlier than men. People, with the exception of Andrea Mitchell, is interesting. Most women are, taken off the camera by the time that they reach about 47. So it's a real problem. So if you think that one of our major vehicles of communication, meaning media, has such ageist biases in its inherent in its operations, you can imagine how that conversation is not had in society. I want you all to learn more about the impact of ageism on a workforce. There are three things. First, there is the fear of a brain drain. All right. They are a source of knowledge that most corporations need. They bring perspectives that most corporations need. And yet we see over and over again corporations trying to come up with early retirement packages, and it's always seen, early retirement is usually seen as a cost-saving measure in the private sector and in the corporate sector, and not looking at the implications of what it means to have not to have an age-inclusive workforce. Many studies have shown, as we have with women, that an age-inclusive workforce gives you higher productivity, and also is quite profitable to your bottom line. So it boggles the mind why something that makes economic sense is not logical and not logically applied. It's the same thing that happened with women in the workforce. People have always said that women bring a perspective that corporations need, value, and end up finding profitable, and yet it boggles the mind how long it's taken women to really advance in the workforce. So I applaud all of you for your efforts. We are here to support you and to have as many sessions as we need so we could work together to combat ageism. And it's like I say to everyone, dear, you started aging the day you were born. And you're not going to stop aging to the day you die. And so my thing is embrace it, make it work for us, make it work for society. So I want to thank you again. And the other thing I want to remind all of you, and I'm sure that the panel will continue discussing this, is that we have created with the City of New York, and I also thank your commissioner again, Dawn. We have something called Silver Stars, where we give an opportunity to New York City retirees to return to the workforce in a manner that doesn't affect their pension benefits or their financial security, but if anything, enhances their financial security and enhances city agencies because they bring back talent and individuals who have not only good work ethics, but who are familiar with city systems and in many cases, subject matter experts. So I hope we can talk a little bit about that and encourage all of your agencies to start contacting Maritza and DFTA so we can talk about Silver Stars. So with that, I leave you to your session. I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Lorraine. And thank you for your wonderful comments, always so insightful. I said to you all that she is so passionate about combating ageism because it's a moral imperative as well as a business imperative. And it's my pleasure to now welcome Commissioner Donna and Pinock, as you heard Lorraine say, another New Yorker who is passionate about equity and inclusion. She needs no introduction. Welcome, Commissioner Pinock. So good to have you.
Thank you so much, Maritza. And you are absolutely right. Following Lorraine, Commissioner Cortez Vasquez is very, very tough. She is such a champion. She is a wonderful speaker. I am so inspired every time I hear her speak, regardless of the topic, but I'm really thankful to be here today in partnership with DFTA. And so I look forward to strengthening our partnership. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm happy to be here with all of you. I would like to start by thanking the Department for the Aging for hosting this event in partnership with DCAS and our Office of Citywide Equity and Inclusion. This two-part event series will serve to provide our HR, EEO, and DEI practitioners with tools and best practices on how to create and sustain an age-inclusive workforce. Special acknowledgement to our keynote speaker. I'm looking forward to hear him speak. Peter Caldes, CEO for the American Society on Aging, and Deputy Commissioner Joanne Ward from the city's Commission on Human Rights, who will share their expertise today on this important topic and explain the roles we all have to build an age-inclusive workplace. I know firsthand the value of honoring the thoughts, feedback, and lessons offered by younger and older generations. Living in a multi-generational household with my 75-year-old mother and my 12-year-old daughter, I'm constantly seeing how much they learn from one another through their daily interactions. For me, it's moments like these that emphasize the benefits of age inclusivity. This same perspective is what needs to be reinforced and brought into our workplace. A lot of times, senior leadership buy-in is the deciding factor in changing our agencies for the better. Without that support, it can be difficult. That is why I'm proud to be here to support that change along with my colleagues from other city agencies. One of DCAS's core values is equity, meaning that our goal is to provide services that help city government uplift and empower all New Yorkers. Empowering all New Yorkers also means creating an inclusive environment for our staff and recognizing where there are disparities. The city's workforce spans over 5 generations. A statistic I'm happy to read because aging is a blessing. But with that information, there's a question we should always be asking ourselves. Is this workplace inclusive towards all those generations? Another question should be, are we being age inclusive as we possibly can be at all times when we're thinking about hiring, promotion, and career development? Every year, DCAS releases the New York City Workforce Profile Report, which provides a snapshot of our key demographic information and other characteristics about the city's workforce. According to our most recent report, over 50% of the city's workforce is over the age of 40. And for the last 5 years, the average age of our city employees has been 44. We'll go into greater detail on statistics later in the presentation today, but these initial findings exemplify how vital it is to have an age-inclusive workplace. Many times, age inclusivity is overlooked as we try to bridge disparities across other areas. To tackle ageism, we need to first understand what it really means to create an age-inclusive workplace. That's why today's discussion and others to follow are so very important. To that end, I'm happy to say that DCAS offers training for all city employees on managing this multi-generational workforce. And we recently launched a revamped mandated training that covers core EEO principles, workplace harassment, and we also have incorporated matters relating to age discrimination for the first time in the city's history. Understanding these topics can help us create a foundation of inclusivity in the workplace. Beyond this training, there are other methods the city can use to learn, grow, and create a more inclusive workplace. DCAS's Office of Citywide Recruitment markets and makes priority city government work and public sector careers to all populations and especially underserved communities when we look at our workplace demographics. Their goal is to spread awareness and to really highlight the career trajectory that can be offered through city government work. And in this fiscal year alone, they've had the opportunity to touch at least 6,200 job seekers. And while that is certainly a number to be proud of, there's so much more work to do. And that's why today's discussion, and I'm hopeful that we will continue this partnership and others to follow, really serve as a springboard and a foundation for us to have these necessary conversations about how to have all ages reflected across all of our job categories. And so I once again thank you for joining us all today, and personally want to thank DFTA for this opportunity to partner. And so with that, it is my pleasure to turn things over back to our moderator, Maritza Arroyo. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Pinock. Always insightful and powerful remarks, and thank you for your leadership. I'm so glad we're recording this because there's so many nuggets that you shared. One question is this, is this workplace inclusive for all generations? That definitely stuck with me. And the fact that 60%, right, of our city workforce here at the city of New York is over the age of 40, which we can expect that number to continue to grow. So thank you. It is my great pleasure now I'm excited and grateful to have Peter Caldes, CEO of the American Society of Aging, join us today. Peter is a former Obama White House senior economic advisor. He's a former CEO of the South Florida Institute of Aging. He possesses a wealth of expertise in advocacy, philanthropy, and economic development. He is so passionate about this imperative on dismantling ageism, you're going to feel it through the screen. And P.S., just like Commissioner Cortez Vasquez and Commissioner Pinock, he is a New Yorker too. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Thank you to DCAS, Commissioner Cortez Vasquez. It's great to see you again. I am delighted to be here. And I have a few words to say, and I'm not shy because I was born in Brooklyn. So it's not going to surprise you. Look, we're an aging society. We're also an ageist society, but we can each be an ally and champion for age inclusion. So let's first talk about what ageism is. The renowned psychiatrist, Bob Butler, explained that ageism can be seen as a systematic stereotyping of and discrimination against people because they are old, just as racism and sexism accomplishes this with skin color and gender. The activist Maggie Kuhn, who co-founded the Grey Panthers, a social justice organization for older adults, said, ageism is the notion that people become inferior because they have lived a specified number of years. And when I would make ageist jokes to my Greek immigrant grandmother who lived in Brooklyn, she would say, "Εκεί που είσαι ήμουν, εδώ που είμαι θα έρθεις," which translates to where you are, I was, and where I am, you'll be. Look, New York City, you know what ageism is. You're running terrific campaigns against it and making important policy decisions and investments. But I'm going to push on this innovative city to think even further about all the forms of ageism that exist. First, there's what we call benevolent ageism. You know, this idea that older adults need to be protected, taken care of, and complimented simply because they are old. It's paternalism, it's over-accommodation, it's elder speak, like baby talk. Oh, those two old people are holding hands, how adorable, or let me get that for you, young lady. And then there's flat out hostile ageism. The idea that older people are incompetent, offer little value, are expected to act and live in certain ways. We use dismissive language, exclude them from groups, opportunities, benefits, treatments, you know, things like, get out of my way, why are you so slow? I hate the elderly. But here's the problem. Age-based stereotypes are flawed. The older we get, the more diverse we become. And there's no such thing as the elderly, some monolithic group of people. Chronological age is an extremely limited way of categorizing people, and all the generational stereotypes, while easy and convenient for the media and for memes, have little evidence behind them. Older people work, play, advocate, shop, care. We know that aging is not only a time of decline, we can make gains in happiness and resilience and education and love and passion and income. But most importantly, age-based stereotypes are discriminatory. There's no doubt about it. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say othering dehumanizes, but aging, you know, after all, is all about us. And ageism isn't just about, you know, getting our feelings hurt with a silly greeting card. Science has shown ageism impacts our health and healthcare. It leads to a denial of medical treatment options, pain mismanagement, underdiagnosis of depression, substance abuse, undesired overtreatments, shortage of geriatricians, and you get excluded from all sorts of trials. And then the internalized ageism, you know, what we say to ourselves about our age, it impairs our memory. It increases anxiety. It increases cardiac events, loneliness, helplessness, and there's sort of less engagement with healthcare providers. So what can this group of HR and DEI professionals do to combat ageism in the workplace? Over the past 2 years, we've seen a surge in the hiring of diversity professionals and an expansion of diversity programming across many dimensions. This is good, this is great, but a glaring omission from many organizations' DEI strategy is age. Recent AARP research found that over 53% of executives do not include age as part of a DEI strategy within the organizations. And when age is not addressed within diversity strategy, exclusion can happen, especially to older workers. And while employers complain about a worker shortage, they're ignoring older workers who are continuing to make up a significant segment of the US workforce for the foreseeable future. According to the BLS, the workforce growth rates of those ages 55 and older are projected to outpace all other age groups over this decade. But we need to fix ageism in the workplace first. So let's think about how ageism actually impacts the workplace. There's a lower likelihood of active recruitment of older adults, lower performance reviews by employers, there's fewer training or upskilling opportunities for older adults, and there's harassment and discrimination. And then going back to that internalized ageism, think about your older adult worker. They're likely to experience higher periods of unemployment, a higher risk of receiving financial advice that they don't need or want, which threatens their income, their retirement, their savings. So for organizations to continue growing, they must root out age-related bias in their culture, in their policies, in their practices. This calls for abandoning long-held harmful stereotypes about older workers. And it's hard, I know. And look, there's research that supports there are real benefits to hiring older workers. They can be more loyal to their employers. They stay at organizations longer. They're more productive. They've got strong set of skills and experience and networks and perspectives and ideas. So if you agree that older workers have value, then let's hire them. But let's start with demystifying the job search for them. Let's look at some job descriptions and think about what the older adult applicant sees when reading them. Age discrimination in job descriptions is something very obvious, like a recent college graduate. But then there's ageist language that can be even more subtle, like tech savvy, digital native, flexible, energetic, active, high potential. So then when you begin to screen your applicants, you should probably check your biases. Are you ignoring applicants with a college graduation date of 20 years ago? Are you disregarding applicants with a resume longer than 3 pages? Are you passing on an applicant because they don't have a LinkedIn or social media presence? Are you rejecting applicants with an email address that ends in AOL or some other uncommon domain? When you've selected your candidate after this process, here are some questions you just have to avoid asking during the interview process. So when do you expect to retire? Are you comfortable working for a younger manager? Can you keep up with our company's technology demands? Do you have any chronic diseases or health issues? Now, I know no one in this Zoom chat would ever ask those questions, but you'll be surprised. Once you hired these older workers, you'll find, if you haven't already, that 5 generations of folks will be working together. Sustaining your operations will require contributions from each of them. So to get there, organizations must understand how a multi-generational workforce can best integrate into their workplace. Members of each generation or age cohort tend to have in common certain values and perceptions around work that arise from, shared experiences of the formative years. Each group brings expectations regarding authority and hierarchy and work ethic and work behaviors and life issues. And at times it causes conflict or stress in a multi-generational workplace, but it's worth it. Mixed age teams leads to more innovation and higher productivity, ultimately leading to better organizational performance. And by training managers and employees about age bias, and organizations will be better positioned to avoid situations that can lead to litigation. If you need any additional resources, then I would encourage you to become a member of the American Society on Aging. Our members know that it is past time for organizations to fully embrace older workers as a segment of diversity and source of quality talent. It starts with fostering a multi-generational culture that looks beyond stereotypes to recognize ability, regardless of age or any other dimension of diversity. Organizations need to confront our deeply, deeply ingrained biases if we're to access the wide array of available talent. We need workplaces flexible enough to accommodate a truly diverse workforce, and we must abandon our stereotypes about what people are capable of and start empowering people to reach their full potential. And look, if we don't, we will continue to see $850 billion in lost gains to our GDP as a result of things like involuntary retirement, underemployment, unemployment. We'll continue to see $63 billion in healthcare costs due to ageism. And look, most importantly, we're just hurting our future selves. So let's start loving our future selves and end ageism. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me today.
Thank you so much, Peter. Oh my God, I'm so glad again that we're recording. What stuck out was what your grandmother said. Where you are, I was, and where I am, you will be. That's gonna stick with me. And so having said that, folks, use your chat. What takeaways did you have from Peter? He had so much to share. I know that we've got a takeaway slide from him that we'll be sharing with you. And another takeaway for me was mixed age teams are more innovative. You can raise your hand and share your thoughts as well. And, while you're doing that, our next two, let's see. Yes, where you are was, yes, me too. Grandmothers, always full of wisdom. Well, we're hearing from some more folks. Our next two speakers have a lot of information and data to share. I know that I'm a data geek, so definitely take your notes. Sabrina Middleton, for me, her takeaway, it was ensuring that we are not presenting any biases when recruiting. Thank you for sharing, Sabrina. All right, thank you. So our next speaker joining us is New York City Commission on Human Rights, CCHR, Deputy Commissioner of Policy and External Affairs, Joanne Kemeth-Ward. She has long been a champion of human rights, fighting inequality and social injustices. Prior to joining CCHR, DC Kemeth-Ward was the director at Columbia Law School's Human Rights Institute. And prior to that, in legal practice at Cleary Gottlieb Steen and Hamilton LLP and MFY Legal Services Inc. I'm taking you back, Joanne. On a rainy day, do look up and read her many publications on human rights. We are so fortunate to have her as one of our City of New York public servants. Welcome, Joanne.
Great. Thank you so much. Can you hear me just okay?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. So first I wanted to just start by reminding myself never to speak directly after a great keynote. So next time I'll go before Peter. But really wanted to say thanks to DFTA and to DCAS for this event and for inviting the participation of the Commission on Human Rights. As mentioned, I'm Joanne Kemeth-Ward and I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Policy and External Affairs. Two important points that I want to make that just build on what we've already heard is that my family and Commissioner Vasquez's family both arrived here in 1921, so that's a fun fact. And Peter, Caldes, and I are both born and bred Brooklynites, so lots in common. I had put together a few slides, but I actually think I would forego them. I defer to DCAS. We can run through them or not. We can definitely share them out afterwards. But really, I am going to talk a little bit about the human rights law today and want to underscore before that the views and opinions that I'm going to express are my own. I think I was invited here to highlight New York's great local law 121 of 2020, which calls on DCAS in consultation with the Commission on Human Rights to create training and materials to address age discrimination in the workplace, and requires biennial trainings for staff of every city agency. But I think it's important to talk about the New York City human rights law protections related to age, because those protections and the work of our agency to foster inclusion, a theme we've already been talking about, are highly linked to why this local law is important. And I'll close out with some best practices that really, I think, bolster what we've already heard from our keynote speaker today. So for those of you who don't know the New York City Commission on Human Rights, we have a dual mandate, and one piece is enforcing the city's human rights law. The second piece, which is equally important, is fostering inclusion and intergroup relations in all parts of New York City. And our policy team, where I sit, connects these two efforts. So I'll start with just the city's human rights law, which I think, as most of you hopefully know, covers employment, housing, and public accommodations. So a wide swath of daily life in New York City. And it includes 27 protected categories, which include age and race and disability and gender discrimination, which also have already been mentioned today. The city's human rights law has prohibited age discrimination since 1977. So it's been in the law for quite a long time. And it's important when we're talking about the human rights law protections and things like ageism and discrimination to understand that our law is intersectional. So it recognizes that each of us have complex identities made up of many different parts of our experience. That means that our age is one slice of who we are, but that all the pieces of our identity are what really contribute to a powerful and effective workforce, as Peter has been talking about. The human rights law is reflective of the city's commitment to eliminate all forms of discrimination. And it's for this group, I also wanted to highlight that it offers more protections against age discrimination in the workplace than its state or federal counterparts. So for example, age discrimination claims can be brought at any age in New York City. And in contrast, at the federal level, there's only particular age carve-outs. So it's a violation of the New York City human rights law for an employer, employment agency, or labor organization to discriminate against job applicants and employees based on their actual or perceived age. And as we've already talked a little bit about, the focus on ageism is critical because negative stereotypes and assumptions are at the root of what often is a discriminatory practice. So we want to get to those assumptions and negative stereotypes before they lead to either problematic behavior or discrimination. For example, there are pervasive beliefs that age predicts ability. We talked about that a little bit, but that fails to account for the reality of the benefits of an intergenerational workforce that really research, as Peter was talking about, bears out. And ageism can and does negatively impact both older and younger workers. So I think we're focused a little bit on the first category, but it really can impact everyone negatively, and that's another reason it's quite critical to address. And Peter also mentioned this, but age-based discrimination and harassment can occur even when there's a potential good intention, such as statements that reflect paternalism, either again towards younger or older employees. So we know what the law says. I'm happy to talk about the law at length at any time. And we know that intergenerational workforces actually have workplace benefits, as our keynote speaker has already identified. So what are some best practices that we can think about both in hiring as well as retention? Because it's one thing to create a workforce that's intergenerational, and it's another thing to retain that workforce. So how do we do those things? So in hiring, some best practices that I wanted to just note, and I have, again, other resources I can share that are much longer and go into the legal protections we have, and we can put those in the chat when I'm done. But avoid any age-based limitations except where they're required by law. It's always important with any jobs or candidates to really focus on qualifications. And I will note requirements related to age are very, very rare. So there's almost no time when thinking about age-based limitations makes sense. In job descriptions and interviews, and we heard this a little bit already, focus on requirements and competencies and avoid terms that may suggest a bias based on age. So that can be young, youthful energy. We've already heard the term digital native, or looking for people who are fresh-minded. That might suggest that there could be a bias, whether or not that's actually the case. In general, do not ask individuals' age. We talked about that already as well. Another important point, which maybe we think about less often, is ensuring that the materials that we put out, either internally or externally, including recruitment materials, reflect your agency's age diversity and what your workforce really looks like and who is there, and that helps to demonstrate that it's a priority. I think another piece that's critical is recruitment pipelines. And we hear this in lots of different ways, but don't rely solely on things like college or high school fairs, right? Because that's going to attract people likely in one age group. So think about how can you use community connections, professional associations, and networks that you probably already work with or other sibling agencies are connected to share out job opportunities. In interviews, and I think this comes up all the time in the land of EEO, use structured interviews and consistent objective standards that relate to the job functions for all candidates. And that helps in many, many ways, both to ensure that any implicit biases we have are not informing our interviews and our evaluation standards. And I'm glad DCAS is here because there are many great resources on those topics and great trainings as well. After hiring and during employment, and this is the piece about retention, include different age groups in diversity and inclusion efforts. Have discussions, brown bag lunches, webinars that focus on this particular topic so that it also becomes less taboo in general to talk about it. And it also signals, as we started at the beginning, saying that there's leadership buy-in in ensuring maximum diversity and inclusion. And then a few other things I would just note, avoiding comments that may constitute discrimination or harassment. I know this seems often like a no-brainer, but it happens. And when those comments do happen in your workplace, address them, right? That's just being an ally in general. And there are things that I think seem more commonplace often, but can still be either inappropriate or constitute discrimination. Calling younger individuals kid, calling an older employee grandpa, right? These are things that sometimes might be a joke, but they are not necessarily received that way, and they can be really harmful in the workplace. And the close to final thing I'm going to say is really that any and all decision making regarding hiring, discipline, and retention should really have a significant relationship to a significant business objective that makes it so that biases are removed from the calculations that we're making in the workplace to the extent that we can anticipate. And finally, and I promise this is where I'm going to close, is that it's important to ensure that employees and supervisors take the available age discrimination trainings, but then also after those trainings to continue to create discussions that surface the principles that these trainings raise. And I know DCAS already mentioned some trainings. The Commission on Human Rights also has a training focused on this topic, and we're always available to provide it, whether to our sibling agencies or to community groups as well. So thank you so much for your time. I'll share our legal guidance in the chat and look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Commissioner Kenneth Ward. I was typing as fast as I could best practices in the chat, but I know you'll be sharing some more. And again, we will be compiling all of these nuggets and share it with everyone. And next in our agenda is our friend, Kadian. So my colleague Yvette Santiago and I met back in December to pitch the idea of this event, and Kadian immediately said yes. For the last 6 years and counting, Kadian Hutar has been the Executive Director of the Office of Citywide Equity and Inclusion at DCAS. Her office is responsible for ensuring proper and consistent implementation of the city's Equal Employment Opportunity, EEO, policy and other related policies and procedures, and provides best practice guidance impacting over 80 City of New York agencies. We're so grateful for your partnership, Kadian, and DCAS's partnership. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I am also trying to multitask and do all of these different things because that's what happens when I say yes to things, and you think I would learn to stop saying yes. So, thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for being here. I really just want to reintroduce what we do for those of you who may not know, those of you who are joining us for the first time. And for our part of the presentation, we really want to speak about how you can continue to build and sustain that multi-generational workforce. My name is Katie Otar. As you mentioned, I am the executive director within the office, within Citywide Equity and Inclusion. We dropped the office. I have been with the city going on 7 years now. And the city was a place I thought about when I was recruiting, and I could pull people from there, you know, because I was a recruiter, and I was thinking, hey, this is a good place that I can pull people from because people don't really want to stay there. But as I came into city government and learned more about what city government is and learned about the different aspects of city government and the different things that you can do within city government, I learned why most of the people that I tried to pull didn't want to leave, didn't want to go. And so this is a great opportunity to be here. So what do? The Citywide Equity and Inclusion team, let me just move this out of the way, we really ensure the proper and consistent implementation of the city's equal employment opportunity policy, which I'm glad to say we updated and re-released at the end of last year. And other related policies and procedures. And we provide the best practices guidance impacting the workforce across over 80 plus city agencies through 3 different units. One is the Investigations and Compliance Unit. That really conducts high-level investigations. We have Policy and Program Development, which really organizes the mandatory EEO best practices meeting that most of you EEO officers are familiar with. And we review and approve the agency's annual diversity and EEO plans, as well as your quarterly reports. And of course, we have the Office of Citywide Recruitment, where, as Don mentioned, conducts extensive outreach to build a diverse talent pipeline and manages the city's 55A program, which really allows individuals with disabilities to come into city government without having to take a civil service exam. So with that being said, I wanted to really, before we can talk about what it is that we want to do when it comes to age and diversity, we always have to start at the same place. We always need to know where we are. And how do we find out where we are? We always have to look at the workforce demographics. And thankfully, we have a fabulous team within Human Capital, DCAS Human Capital, that puts together our New York City Government Workforce Profile Report and our latest report for the fiscal year 2019 that shows just that. The workforce report, basically, I'm going to be focusing on the age aspects of it, though you can get all sort of data from this if you're looking at all different types of diversity. You really need to figure out where you are so you can determine where you need and want to be to determine how to get there. And so looking at this data is going to help you to determine what strategies and initiatives you need to put together. Just a reminder, this information is readily available to everyone on the DCAS website. As we mentioned, we will be sharing this information with you. So if you have not yet accessed it, you will have the link to do so. It is citywide, but you can also view it for your specific agencies. So some of the things that you will see within that data. As Don mentioned, 50% of the city's workforce is over the age of 40, with 12% of city employees being over 60. The actual number is 58% compared to 50% in the general New York City workforce. And so that's definitely should say, hey, stop, we already have a city workforce that is diverse when it comes to age. All you have to do is look around you. Look at your screen, look at your coworkers, look at everybody that you work with on a daily basis. That will tell you that there is a need to make sure that we are creating an age-inclusive workforce, that the work that we're speaking about matters because we live it every single day. So it's important for us to know that and to apply it to everything that we do. The median age for the NYC government workforce across the last 9 years has been 44. Also, what you want to look at is the distribution of hires. Roughly 25% of new hires and over 35% of rehires are over the age of 40. What does that tell you? Well, there's some things that you want to think about. is that a good number or a bad number? Well, you need to look at the comparison data. What does it look like in the external workforce? What does it look like in the private sector? Right? Is this something that's typical within that government? But then is that something that's typical within your agency? Is this something that you are okay with? Right? This is something, if you look at the fact that individuals who leave the workplace, 35% with over the age of 40 comes back, there's maybe an opportunity for you to say, let's look at the gaps. Let's look at how we can bring that number higher. Let's look at the initiatives that we have, that the recruitment initiatives that we have, and the work that we can do to include that. How can we include some of the things that Peter mentioned, some of the things that Ms. Joanne mentioned? Like, what can we do to make sure the next time we do that report, that number is at 35%, or it's at 40%, or it's at 50%. We can be greedy, right? We can make it go higher. What can we do? So this is what the workforce profile information will show you. We need to really understand where we are and to really think about what it is that we want to do and where we want to be with this information. Another important aspect is looking at the resignation. Pretty much looking at the retention. 30% of employees 40 and older resigned in fiscal year 2019. That means 70% of them stayed. One of the points that Peter mentioned is that people are committed. Within that age, they stay within the workforce. So when you're recruiting, if you are recruiting, that's one thing that you look at, retention. Who's going to stay within your workforce? There's a lot of investment that's made when you're doing a new hire. There's a lot of training that's involved. There's a lot of education. There's a lot of money that's spent. There's a lot of wait time for approvals to get individuals within the workforce. So when you're recruiting, you're also looking at people, hiring individuals that are going to stay for the long run. So this is information that you need to know. Right? You need to know that individuals that within that, you need to target individuals that are going to stay within your workforce. Because when you think about the individuals that you're hiring, you want to think about what they bring to the table. And if you're looking at individuals that are within a specific age group, they come with not just the institutional knowledge, and thinking about city government, institutional knowledge is important. You need that information. You need something that can be transferred, but also just knowledge overall. Somebody that's been in the workforce for 10 years, 15 years, they have a lot of knowledge that can be useful just as well as somebody that's new to that workforce. There's an opportunity for both ends, but we need to recognize that the opportunity is there, and we need to apply that in the work that we do. How can we address that? You've heard a couple of things that you can do to address it, right? But we want to put it down. We want to make sure that we are doing this. We're putting into action some of the things that are available to us. We want to make sure that it's not just having the conversation, it's doing it. And I know some of you, especially the EEO officers and the HR that has been a part of these conversations before, that has been listening to us talk about diversity and saying, hey, you need to consider, gender, you need to consider sexual orientation, you need to consider disability, you need to consider all of that. And you're saying, Kadian, I would love to consider it. Give me the resource. I'm one person. We don't have any money. We don't have the resources. We don't have it. We want to do it, but we don't have it. What can we do? And we understand that. We understand that it's a challenge, but we also understand the need to take a holistic approach to diversifying our workforce. We understand that sometimes it's easy to just go with what's happening within the social aspects. Right? What's happening, what's immediate, what's out there in that's attentive, that everyone is paying attention to. And sometimes the other areas that are as important fall back. And so for one of the things that we're saying is put it into action. Take what you know. Back when I was in college, I hated math. Calculus was the only class I ever failed. I hated calculus. And I went to my math professor. And he said, what do you know? You know everything about trees, right? I said, yes, I know everything about trees, but I have to write about a goat. He said, take that goat, tie it to the tree, and now write about the tree. That's really what math is. Take what you know, take it and apply it to what you know. So when it comes to recruitment, diversifying what you're doing, sometimes the understanding is there, the basics is there, right? Some outreach, you need to reach out to schools. Think about the intersectionality, right? Within LGBT, within individuals with disability, within the Black community, within the Hispanic community, there's a lot of overlap. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be something new. It could be taking what you know and applying it to what it is that you want to do, but ensuring that we're actually doing it. So we're coming up with our annual diversity and EEO plans, right? The new templates are going to be due. This is where we're going to be looking at initiatives that you're including, not just on the regular initiatives that we usually focus on, the race, the gender, the ethnicity, the disability. We want to see that age is included as well, right? And we want to work with you to get there. We're looking at the trainings that you already have available to you. Everybody matters. This is a brand new training that is required based on Local Law 121. This is a mandatory training for every single employee that works for the city. You have to take it. This is an opportunity for everyone to get educated on the importance of understanding not just age, but all aspects of diversity in EEO. There's microaggressions, because microaggression can show up in all different aspects. There's structured interviewing and unconscious bias. Peter mentioned some of the questions that are asked within the interview process that can lead to some kind of bias. There's managing the multi-generational workforce. We are in a multi-generational workforce. How are we managing that? Do we know how to manage that? Inclusive recruitment best practices training for HR, EEO, and DEI staff. We know that you may not all have all the tools that you need, and we want to be here to support you. That's where our office comes in. As much as possible, we want to provide you with the tools that can assist you in doing the things that we're telling you that, hey, this is important for you to do. Sometimes you already know that it's important for you to do it. You just don't have the resources. And so we want to provide these training, these access for you to have it, not just the knowledge of it, but really how to apply it. With recruitment, you've heard it. Joanne mentioned it. Peter mentioned it. Be intentional. You're recruiting every single day. Your call to action, besides the one that we're going to show, when you leave here, that job description that you have to post today, because thankfully you got that OMB approval, take a look at it. Do you have those language? Do you have recent graduates? Do you have all of those language that we just mentioned on it? And if you do, rethink it. These are things that you can do right away, but you have to be intentional in what you're doing. Commissioner also mentioned the DFTA Silver Stars program. If you want to learn more about it, you can definitely contact Kimberly Skelsa at silverstars@asian.nyc.gov. These are programs that are available to assist you in making sure that we are addressing age inclusion within our workforce. There are a lot of opportunities there. And yes, we do understand the challenges. We know, we got it. It's really hard sometimes when you have to focus on this diversity and there's something that happens in the news. So there's, of course, you have to refocus your attention and reshift your attention. And this is why we want to make sure that we continue to have these conversations. We continue to show you that you are supported in the work that you do, that we're doing this as a collaborative effort. It's not something that we want to say, here you go, just do it, get it done, and that's it. We're here to support you. This is why we're here as a team. The data, whether it's the data we need to show you, the training, if that's what you need, the hand holding, we're here to do that. But these topics are important. And this is why we're here today. And we thank you and appreciate you for being open to the conversation and for saying, yes, me showing up today and saying, yes, I am interested. Just Kadian, show me, tell me, how do I do it? Because I want to do it. And with that being said, I'll turn it back over to Marissa. Marissa?
All right, thank you, Kadian. Okay, our speakers understood the assignments. All right, Peter, Joanne, Kadian, they dropped a lot of knowledge. So I hope y'all have been taking notes. Again, we are going to transcribe this and send it to you. And this is all in preparation, right? There were a lot of questions peppered in everyone's, remarks, in Commissioner Cortez Vasquez, Commissioner Pinock, with Peter, Joanne, with Kadian. And all of this is to really prepare us for the next event on the 13th, where we're going to put it into action, right? We're going to be intentional, and DCAS and DFTA is here to support you. So next, and thank you, Peter, we're going to show a short video that really ties a lot of what we've been speaking about today. It's about reframing. And so take it away, Kadian. Thank you.
What do all these people have in common? Every day, they're doing something that we're all doing too. Getting older. Aging is a universal, shared experience. But the way we talk about it can diminish and harm older people, even when we don't mean to. It's phrases that casually equate being older with being less valuable. It's imagery that too often portrays older people as needy or isolated. There's a better way to communicate about aging. We can stop othering older people by talking about us instead of them. A them statement segregates and blames. For example, older adults are a challenge for our healthcare system. They make a lot of demands on a system that is not prepared to care for them. An us statement is inclusive and helps all of us see ourselves in the issue and in the solution. For example, we need a healthcare system that is built to help all of us live well as we age. When choosing photos, images of diverse older people interacting with others send a more inclusive message. When we shift from them to us, we promote a more realistic, inclusive view of aging, reduce bias, and build support for policies and programs that can help all of us at every age. The Reframing Aging Initiative provides free evidence-based tools to help us get there. Learn more at reframingaging.org.
Thank you, Kadian. So this is it, right? It's all of us, right? It's all of us. It's the reframing from them to us. It's about being intentional. It's about being the change. So I hope that you've taken a lot of notes, and we're really looking forward to the 13th. But here's the best part. You get to ask questions of our experts. I know Peter has stuck around. Kadian is here. And so I'm going to now pass it on to my colleague, Yvette Santiago. She's an associate at the DFTA Office Public-Private Partnerships, and she's going to lead the way. Thank you, Yvette.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, Maritza,
Yes.
Sorry, guys. Maritza, I just wanted to circle back a little bit. Peter had a really good slide on the takeaways from his comments. So I wanted to present the opportunity to go over that before we went into the Q&A.
Yes,
Peter?
thank you, Kadian. Yes, so Peter, how about if you review these, and then we'll head into the Q&A led by Yvette. Thank you.
Sure, sure. And obviously for folks watching, can't exactly click on the Zoom link, so apologies for that. But I'm sure you'll get this through an email, that you'll be able to click on these resources. And really, for us, these resources are available to everybody. And there are multiple ways to get at tackling ageism. And these are just some of the ways that you can deploy or be inspired by in your organization. I would say if there is one thing to do here while having your coffee, is to click on that link called Let's End Ageism when you're able to, by Ashton Applewhite. It's her seminal TED Talk that she gave in 2017 that really challenges just basic notions of ageism. And I have to give credit to her for inspiring. She's really starting a new movement around ageism, and she's doing a great job. And we could all learn a few things. Everything else is are really tactical things that you could deploy. Finally, I would say to the extent you have relationships with media, I know media is a big deal and perpetuates ageism because it's easy, not because it makes money, by the way. If you look at some successful Netflix shows recently with older storylines, older character storylines, they're making a ton of money for the organization, for Netflix. So media should wake up and actually see that there's money to be made here. And finally, if you are on social media, these handles are handles to follow. Obviously, our handle, but also these are other real leaders in the anti-ageism movement that we hope you follow.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter. This is Yvette Santiago with the Office of Public-Private Partnerships. So, Peter, you're on the hot seat. So we're gonna check the chat right now and look for questions. And I want to go back to a comment that Maria Ocasio put into the chat, and then Osorio, excuse me. She said it's important to have the agency's historic knowledge, experience with the agency's successes and failures in the program development, policy development, implementation, to strategically plan for the future. I thought that was a very important comment there in the chat. And as we wait for other questions to come in, I have been sort of with my ear to the street, listening to how the racial equity warriors and the DEI proponents, they're sort of battling and saying, you're doing your thing and we're doing our thing, and these things are not, like jiving together. DEI is just a lot of talk. Racial equity is really doing the work. What do you say about that and the intersectionality of those things?
Yeah, I would say that's exactly right. It's intersectional, and I think we would only be reinforcing the division and the lack of equity if we don't recognize the interconnected nature of all these social categorizations that we've come up with, like race, class, gender. It's an overlapping, but at times independent system of discrimination or disadvantage. So if you are at a minimum aware of the intersectionality, I think that is a start. And I think our racial justice brothers and sisters would agree. I don't think we need to prioritize. I think we need to get at all of this. I know it's hard to boil the ocean, and that's what it sometimes feels like, particularly in the DEI context. But ageism in particular, there's a lot of intersectionality with ageism. When you think of gendered ageism, when you think of ageism in race, I have a program director who calls this the triple jeopardy ageism, which is age, gender, and race. So think about older women of color, right? You just need to be much more intentional about various categorizations that we've come up with, but don't forget it is intersectional.
Mm-hmm. Triple jeopardy ageism. I'm scared. I'm there. I'm scared, but I'm glad we're having this conversation. Do we have any others that are on the call that would like to add a question to the chat or raise your hand? We'll welcome you onto the screen. And in the meantime, there was a question, Katie, during your presentation, with regards to workforce, does the attrition numbers include retirees and uniformed personnel? So if you'd like to.
So there are different data set that you will see. There is data on separation that covers retirement, people that are leave for different reasons, and then there's the resignation data. So looking at the workforce profile report will show you the different breakdown of how people leave and the way that they leave. So we can definitely, once you look at the full workforce profile report, you'll be able to see that, and you can specify for your agency and look at that as well.
Okay, thank you. We have Lisa Thornton that she mentions that the use of language in particular in the job posting was very helpful for her to know. Yeah, Peter, your what you shared around seeing an AOL.com and a 3-page resume, that definitely resonated with me. So there's a shift in my mindset that needs to happen too.
Right. And I think what that tells you is this person clearly has committed to the AOL.com email. And that's it. That's all it says. It says they just don't want to change email addresses. It means nothing else. And similarly, a 3-page resume means they have a ton of experience. That's what that means. It means nothing else. So I think we all have to check our biases when reviewing applications.
Yes, yes, awesome. Okay, so we have a question from Christopher Silva. How might one call out ageism to a senior leader? Example, an assistant commissioner referring to college interns as kids or kiddos.
You know, that's a great great question, because you could say the same thing about a variety of terms that reinforce stereotypes, right? Racial and gender. And I would encourage you to approach ageism in the same way. You can point out that reinforcing that they're kiddos or that they're kids is reinforcing the notion that they're inexperienced and they're not of use to you, or I suppose. I don't know what he or she means by that. But I think we just need to become as bold as we've been as DEI and HR professionals in calling out inappropriate behavior and language in racial and gender contexts as we do with ageism contexts.
Yes, agreed.
And sorry, and just to add to that, one of the great things about the microaggression training that we have here at DCAS is that it shows, outlines some of those, words and languages that can be used, and really shows how to professionally, address those situations. So it's good for different individuals to be trained and recognizing them, but also on how to address them in, of course, a respectful and professional manner. So microaggression is not just for, supervisors or senior leaders, it's also for our regular typical staff.
Thank you, Kadian. And we have another comment and question here from Lydia Aponte. This was a great learning opportunity. I had no idea that using phrasing surrounding energy, like seeking an energetic individual or looking for someone with energy to join the team in a job posting, could potentially be harmful to inclusive recruiting. I had learned or thought that this was a term intended to gauge for team culture and input. What do you recommend as other terms that speak to what recruiters might be looking for when using the term energy in job postings? Thank you, Lydia.
Lydia, I would suggest you use what you answered your own question with, which is to say, what are you really trying to get at with energy? You're trying to get at whether they're going to be a part of a team and contribute and be disciplined and regularly contribute and provide input. If that's what you're trying to capture, then use those words. I think that might be the best alternative.
So enthusiasm is what I hear. Is that an okay term?
Yeah, I think it is. I think enthusiasm, but then it's also their context, right? It's not, I don't want to turn this into sort of a vocabulary lesson as much as I want you to think about the context. If you have a list of qualifications that talk about being a digital native and having energy and being a college graduate, well, now you've just excluded a ton of older worker talent. And I think that's really important, is looking at the context of the language.
And I think culture comes into play with regards to enthusiasm and energy. There are some cultures that they show up in a very stoic way, but are very enthused about work and are, very sort of, they're very productive in the workplace. So there's so many different layers to this to consider. And I'm glad we're together trying to, in this think tank, trying to work out all of the differences and the different layers to this conversation. So I'm inviting others. I will gladly read your question. We will invite you onto the screen if you'd like to bless us with your presence. So just a couple of more minutes of Q&A before we move on. So we'd love to hear from you.
Come on, City of New York. We're New Yorkers. We are not shy. Well,
I think we gave
inspired.
them so much to think about. Is that we're just waiting
Yes.
for the next step and saying, how do I do this?
Okay,
ready.
but
What do I do?
Agreed.
Christopher Silva has added another question. So part 2 of his question is, how can I call out someone for being ageist if they are senior leaders?
Yeah, Maritza, I would suggest that this would be great for the part 2, right? Because this is exactly the
Agreed.
practical training that really gets to how do you call out power, right? Because
Yeah.
that's really what this question is about. And I think you don't shy away from difficult conversations to power. I really think it's that simple, and I appreciate in a work environment it can be difficult when you have hierarchy involved. But if we just keep reinforcing the same thing, you can be respectful. You're not, being slanderous. You're just saying, look, you may want to consider using this language, or you may not have considered that they may have reacted and heard that and may have found it offensive. I think there's a way to do this, but again, Maritza, I think this would be wonderful training for part 2.
Agreed. Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you, Christopher. I mean, these conversations can be difficult, but on the 4th, April 13th, when we're gonna have those breakout sessions, we're gonna have a section around this, how to have these difficult conversations, right? In a way, like, as Peter said, in a respectful manner, and that it moves the needle. So thank you.
Great. So should we go into our pop-up survey now?
Well, there's a couple more. Wait, hold
A couple
on.
more. Oh, sorry.
We
Okay.
call people out
Oh,
as they're
okay.
coming out.
Okay, so we have Raymond Vinuesa.
Yeah.
It's important to evaluate existing supervisory or management training for opportunities to include concepts of equity, inclusion, and bias. Agreed. And then we have Patricia Birch. In thinking about ageism, are we only focused in this conversation about adverse behavior towards those who are quote unquote senior? I ask, as I recently received an inquiry where the ageism focus is in the other direction. I know the answer in the EEO context, but wondering about the equity part. Is that clear? Should I reread?
Yeah, the earlier speaker referenced, I have, it's my day job to focus on aging. And so, yes, I skew older, and my population that I speak to tends to skew older. But there's ageism, there's what's called reverse ageism in a way. And I think that the same principles would apply. You're making assumptions about someone based simply on a number and not on their experience. I think that's really at its core.
Thank you, Peter. And we have a question from Jorge Martinez. What is considered a quote unquote older or senior worker? Over 40, 50?
So, this question always comes up, and I love it because there's no right answer. Right? If you're a federal employee, there's one number. If you're state, local, there's other numbers. If you're applying for a loan, it's one number. If you're applying for Medicare, it's another number. We're all over the place as a country. So at the American Society on Aging, we're just focused on aging. We just don't want anyone to be discriminated while they are aging. And so if that means that at 40 you're discriminated against because and you don't get a job, that's important to us. At 60, that's important to us. So it's about fairness, regardless of, again, the number.
Yes, and Commissioner Pinock, she says, all the more reason to be inclusive. We are all aging, exclamation point, 3 exclamation points for that.
We are all aging. Wonderful.
Thank you, Commissioner.
We're at the 2:20 mark, and I think we have maybe a couple more questions. So please, these are all terrific, and we're going to take all of this, transcribe it, and it's really going to inform how we design the Put It Into Practice event on the 13th, which we already have over 150 folks registered. So exciting. I'm going once, going twice. All right. Well, guess what's coming up? Survey says, right? It's time for another pop-up survey because we want more information from you. So what kind, Kadian said, right? We're here to support you. You're not alone. And that goes for DCAS and that goes for DFTA. So we want to ask you, right? What kind of support could you use in taking a more holistic approach on DEI efforts, on employing efforts, so on and so forth. And so here's a couple, workshops, task force, webinars, guest speaker series, training, or all of the above. And if you have any other suggestions, put it into the chat and we'll take that too. And thank you, Peter. Yes, as we are taking the poll, this is, the American Society on Aging is having their conference in New Orleans, folks, Nolans, April 11th, 14th. So a lot to learn there. Thank you, Peter, so much.
Just an update, we have 61, and you all know how this goes. We have 112 people in the room. I need to get to, let's say, 80. We don't get to 80, we don't move on. So come on, I'll be nicer, maybe make it 75. But this will definitely help us as we move forward with our conversation.
I
I'll
want
give
to
it
acknowledge Alexa Samaroto. Please include dealing with paternalistic, benevolent ageism. Thank you. We will take that also in consideration. And Janet Insardi would love ageism resources in one place, agency website. Thank you. We'll speak to the commissioners. That'd be great.
Okay, I have 69 response, 70, so I'll end it there. Thank you all
Yes.
so much. Good, and that's
100% all of the above. And our results are, all right, 67% all of the above, excellent. Kind of even around workshops, webinars, guest speaker series, and training, right around the 20% mark. And a task force, 7%. Folks are like, no more task forces. All right, thank you. This has been wonderful. I hope that it was informative and insightful, and we're really looking forward to the next event, which is putting it into practice, right? We're going to have breakout rooms, and we're going to really help you think around holistic approaches around being inclusive, all inclusive. And thank you. I'm going to thank you to our partners at DCAS, Katie and Commissioner Pinock. Thank you so much. And Deputy Commissioner Ward and Peter, who had to leave. Thank you so much. And I'll pass it to my colleague, Yvette.
Yes, so as we've been plugging throughout the entire event, show up on April 13th, please. Let's continue this conversation. We're going to recap the key insights from this part one. We're going to bring experts in the field to share the current DEI climate, insights on how best to implement DEI in your work and include age. Now, remember, those diversity plans are due July 31st, and we're here to work together to develop the best diversity plans ever, and real meaningful plans that will be ready to sort of act on. And that's really sort of the focus. We include age, and we're ready to hit those goals and objectives. So mark your calendars. If they're not marked, don't forget, come back on the 13th and join us for the conversation again. And let's work collectively so we can create an age-inclusive workplace and an age-inclusive New York City. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And just a note, that's the tentative due date for the annual plan. We will definitely reach out to you for those who have a role in that to let you know more. Thank you.
Be the change.
Yeah, help spread the word on all social media platforms. Here are some of the hashtags: Age Inclusive NYC, Equity and Inclusion, New York NYC Seniors, tag us, tag the Commission on Human Rights, NYCCHR, DCAS, New York City Equity, Multi-Generational NYC. That's where we're headed. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.